Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Astrology with Lauren. I am Lauren. I'm here with my trusty sidekick today, and we are going to be doing a deep dive into the moon. We're in week 3 of understanding our. We're in week what? We're in week 2. Hold up. We're in week 2 of understanding our planets. This week we're focusing on the moon. Last week we did the sun. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the moon through the signs, the houses, a little about aspects to the moon, and I also want to talk about moon phases. I know that's a lot to cover, and I'm going to try and do it in a timely manner so that you and I aren't sitting here for hours talking about the moon, although I totally would. I would love that. But the moon. Let's start out with what is the moon? What do we know about the moon so far? The moon is most commonly communicated to people as your more internal self. So we've covered the sun. That's, your more external expression, how people view you and your ego, your identity. The moon is more internal. It's more private. It's more intimate. It's what you experience on a more private level. Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, the things that people don't necessarily readily know about you. The things that you have to communicate most of the time in order for people to know that you're experiencing them. So the moon can also represent our habits too. It's our emotional habits. It's how we go about expressing our emotions, how we go about feeling our emotions. Are we comfortable with our emotions? Are we uncomfortable with our emotions? And yeah, it's habits as well, and that can be in regards to emotions, and it also can just be our daily habits that we feel safe in, our routines that we feel safe in, the things that we have to go about doing in order to feel grounded and safe. So let's dive into some signs. I gotta have a sip of some coffee first. Let's dive into some signs. We'll start with the fire signs. She's so distracting. She's so cute. I hope you guys are just staring at her the whole time and not me. This is what this video is about. It's about her, not me. The fire moons. So, excuse me. The fire moons. Let's start out with Aries moons. Aries, we know, is a deeply passionate, kind of intense sign. So when we have the moon in Aries, the emotional expression is very immediate. It's very intense. I like to think of Aries moons as matches. The match, when you light it, it's bursts into flames immediately, but typically within maybe 10 seconds, the match has burned out. So in real life, it's probably not that quick necessarily, but Aries moons tend to feel their emotions very immediately, but work through them very immediately. It's a sign that processes quickly. So if that is reinforced elsewhere in the chart, you typically see someone who might blow up, unfortunately, get very upset, very sad, very angry, whatever it is, even happiness, right? It happens very quickly, and then they can move past that emotion very quickly. So it's a little bit about Aries moons. Let's talk about Leo moons. So we know that Leo is the sign that really needs validation. That's definitely true with a Leo moon. If a Leo moon doesn't feel that you're able to validate their emotional experience or their emotions, or even the more intimate parts of themselves, the parts of themselves that they don't share with just everyone, they won't feel safe. They need that validation. They need that level of understanding from the people around them in order to feel safe. They also can be a bit expressive with their emotions. We know that Leo stereotypically likes to be the center of attention. So Leo, again, depending on if it's reinforced in the rest of the chart, may find themselves overemphasizing their emotions with people, making them more of a big deal. Again, they need to take up that space and they need to feel validated. I was going to say something else. I just had a thought and I got distracted about Leo moons, and now I can't remember exactly what I was going to say. Might come back to me. But that's Leo moons. The validation is really important to them. And emotional expression is really important. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So Leo is a fixed sign. So sometimes Leo moons can be really rooted in their emotions and very fixed in them. They are a little stubborn almost in their emotional expression, if that makes sense. Sagittarius moons. Sagittarius moons, we know Sagittarius is a very adventurous, very explorative, if that's a word, sign. So Sag moons, they really need that freedom to express their emotions. They don't want to feel stifled. They don't want to feel like they have to shove their emotions down. That's the word I'm looking for. Hide their emotions. They don't want to be inauthentic. They want to express, feel, and share their emotions in the way that feels best to them. And if they're unable to do that, they will probably leave. They'll probably go and invest in relationships that do give them that emotional freedom to express themselves. Hey, come here. We got a lot going on back here. So those are the fire moons. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the earth moons. Earth moons, Taurus moons, the moon is exalted in Taurus, which means it's extra comfortable. It's almost like a very valued guest has come into your house. You are treating them as such. Taurus moons really value comfort, and they need that sense of comfort in order to feel safe. And that can be like a literal sense of comfort in terms of like a comfortable bed, the comfortable blankets, pillows, things that make them feel like are tangibly comfortable, right? They're a sensual sign. But it also can be this like space that they're in, they need to feel comfortable in. As well as with that sensuality, because they're a very sensual sign, they also really value that in relationships as well. They can be very romantic and, want to wine and dine you, experience good food, good wine, good alcohol, lavish experiences. And that doesn't always have to mean like expensive. It's a like a tactful experience. That's not the word I'm looking for. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. It's and tangible really isn't it either. It's I just keep doing this because I can't think of the word, but I'm just going to say sensual again. It is a sensual experience in the sense that they experience things through their senses. They want it to taste good. They want it to smell good. They want it to feel good. They want it to sound good, right? All the senses. You get the idea. So Virgo moons are very grounded in their routines. They need things to be a certain way. They need to feel like things are right in order for them to feel safe. They need to go about their routines in the right way. They may feel that there is a certain way of doing things, especially when it comes to things like expressing their emotions or their emotional releases. And if it doesn't align with their idea of the right way, it's wrong inherently. So they can be a little rigid in their routines, in their emotional expressions. They are not a very outwardly emotional sign. That doesn't mean they're not emotional or sensitive, but they have a hard time expressing their emotions and sharing their emotions with other people. They also may want to fix. So if you come to them with a problem, they may want to fix the problem for you rather than kind of dealing with the emotions at hand. And sometimes that's from a really empathetic standpoint. It's like, hey, I want to help you. You're struggling with this thing. I want to help you. But also, it can also just be about them wanting to fix. They see a problem. They want to fix it. They're very, what's the love language? Acts of service kind of sign. So Capricorn moons are similar in terms of their emotional expression is stifled. Saturn is the sign that rules Capricorn, so they naturally are more restrictive in terms of their emotional expression. By all means, that does not mean they are not a sensitive sign. They have a lot that goes on underneath the surface. They are very sensitive, but they tend to, on their own, kind of invalidate their experiences. They would rather be doing something that feels productive. They would rather be channeling their energy into something like a project that they're working on, something tangible, and oftentimes feel that their emotions get in the way of that. So tend to focus more on the projects around them, the things that they're working on, rather than their emotional expression. But if a Capricorn moon does express their emotions to you, don't treat that don't treat that lightly, right? That's like a big deal for them to be emotionally vulnerable. Okay, air moons. Let's do the air moons next. Gemini moons are so fun, so chatty. They love to talk about their emotions. They love to be up here. They don't necessarily, their strength is not feeling their emotions, diving into their heart in order to feel and express their emotions. But they will talk about them. They'll talk about them for hours. They love talking about their emotions. And they feel safe in that. They feel safe in communicating. They feel safe in learning. They feel safe in anything logical, right? They may have, like I said, they may feel safe in learning. So they may have lots of hobbies. They have lots of little projects and different things that they're learning. Over here, they're learning how to knit. Over here, they're learning how to sew. They've learned how to garden. The hobbies are important to them. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stick with those hobbies, but they need something to channel that logical thinking, that logical energy into. Learning a new task, having fun with it, and then moving on if they want to. So Libra moons are, we know that Libra is the sign that's most associated with relationships. It's also the sign that is most associated with balance and being very diplomatic. So in relationships, Libra can offer, they really look towards the other person in a relationship to help dictate the nature of the relationship. I like to use this example with Libra moons because I always think about them when couples are arguing about where they want to have dinner. I always think about the Libra moon, and I know this isn't necessarily always the case, but it's just a good example. I always think about the Libra moon as the person who is like, oh, I don't care. Like, I'm down for anything. Like, you pick. And sometimes they tend to push off kind of I don't want to say accountability, but they look to the other person to dictate the relationship. Like, what do you think about this relationship? What are we? Whether it's like a friendship or an intimate relationship or a business partner, so on and so forth. But relationships feel really good to them. They need a solid foundation of people that they can rely on and feel supported by in order to feel safe. Let's see Aquarius moons. I had to think for a second. Aquarius moons are another Saturn-ruled sign. So again, very restricted in terms of how they express their emotions. Aquarius moons are so logical. They would rather stick in the logic than mess with all of the messy emotions, but in terms of Aquarius, they're also a really empathetic sign. So they're not, if you come to them with an issue or they see an issue happening around them, they're going to do what they need to do in order to fix it. They don't want to deal with like the nurturing component necessarily, like, oh, I'm so sorry this is happening to you, like, we'll get this fixed. No, they're going to come in, they're going to logically assess the situation and figure out, how can we best move forward? How can we fix this? What are the steps that we need to take? Again, very logical steps that we need to take in order to fix this issue. And it comes from a very empathetic place, but it doesn't always feel empathetic to the other person because it's experienced more robotic. I'm just thinking about this example that I heard in a podcast by Chris Brennan, and he was talking about being an Aquarius, and one time he had to take his friend to the hospital, and instead of, you know, being like, oh, I'm so sorry this is happening to you, like, we're gonna get this figured out, he had like case studies. Like, here are some case studies on the symptoms that you're experiencing. These might make you feel better. Which maybe to another Aquarius, that might be really supportive. But to someone else who maybe has a broken leg or like has these weird symptoms, it's like, I don't want to read a case study right now. So it's just a silly example that I was thinking about, and I think it's a really good example. All right, let's talk about the water moons, the last element in terms of our 4 elements. The Cancer moon. Cancer is at home in the moon. The moon is at home in Cancer. That's what I was trying to say. And so it's really comfortable here. Cancer moons are highly empathetic. They are intuitive. They're kind, nurturing. They're like the mother of the zodiac. But they're also very protective. They're protective of their people, and they're also protective of their emotional energy. If you think about the crab, they've got the hard external shell protecting the soft insides. And I think that's really apparent for Cancers. So very empathetic, very intuitive, nurturing for sure. They want to take care of the people around them by cooking them their favorite meal, or, gift giving, or whatever their love language is. They don't necessarily fall into like one love language, but the inherent goal, the motivation is to nurture and to offer that level of support to their friends, to their relationships, whatever. Scorpio moons, also very intuitive, also very sensitive, but much more restricted in terms of their emotional expressions. Whereas like the Cancer moon may be highly expressive and highly emotional in their emotional expression. The Scorpio moon is much more restricted. They're very private. They hold their emotions close to the chest, and they're not sharing their emotions with everyone. When they do share, again, it's really important that they're validated and they feel safe to share. If they don't, they probably won't share again. They really appreciate a level of mystery in terms of their intimate parts of themselves. They're not going to be showing all of themselves to just anyone. It's a much more important experience for them to share that. And it doesn't come, like, don't take it lightly when they share their emotions, because it's taking a lot for them to be emotionally vulnerable with you. So, I'm trying to think if I want to say anything else about Scorpio moons. Let's move on to Pisces moons. Pisces moons are also very empathetic, also very intuitive. All 3 water signs have that in common for sure. But Pisces moons they're almost like they're more intuitive, more empathetic, because Pisces is boundless. And you think about Pisces and water, it's like a lake that doesn't end almost. It's boundless. There's no boundaries. And so Pisces has trouble with knowing where, Pisces moons have trouble with knowing where they end and others begin. They tend to pick up on the energies around them, pick up on the tension or happiness or opinions of those around them, and they need a lot of alone time to sift through that, to say like, actually, no, that's not how I feel. This is how I feel. I was taking on the emotions of that experience or that person. And yeah, they need the time to really sort that out, to figure out who they are outside of relationship to other people. Sometimes they get with other people and in other energies and get like confused. Confused isn't the right word, but it gets blurry, right? It gets like, is this how I truly feel, or am I influenced by this other person? All right, let's dive into the houses a little bit. Pisces through the houses. So I'm going to try and be a little quicker with these. Pisces in the first... Pisces. I feel like I said that a second ago too. I meant the moon. Excuse me. The moon. Oh my God, now I have hiccups. The moon in the houses. So the moon in the first house, especially if your moon is close to the ascendant degree, within a couple degrees of the ascendant, you tend to lead with your moon. And that could be, depending on the sign, that you lead with your emotions, you lead with your emotional expression. Or if it's not a super expressive sign, again, it just becomes part of your personality. It's something that's very easily represented when people experience you and are in relationship with you. Hi. It's very apparent in your personality. So take the sign of your moon, and that is doubly influenced in your, like, your rising sign. That's part of your personality. And yeah, you tend to lead with that. That's easily expressed through your personality and through who you are. So the moon in the second house, the second house is all about our values and our valuables. So the moon in the second house can be someone who's really attached to their opinions, to their values, to their beliefs. And it also can be someone who is attached to their things. They feel safe when they have the things that are important to them, the materialistic things that are important to them. And they feel safe when they're able to operate in a way that is aligned with their values. So emotional expression is contingent on those things for them. The moon in the third house is all about learning. They have this innate need to learn about the world, to pick up different interests, and it's more of a like quick, fast-paced learning. It's not like going to school for your PhD for several years. It's, I learned this fact today, that's really interesting. They may read a couple articles on something that was like thought-provoking to them. So it's kind of like knowing a little about a lot rather than knowing a lot about a little, if that makes sense. The moon in the third. The moon in the fourth house is the lowest point of the chart and usually coincides with the IC. So if your moon is really close to the IC or in the fourth house, it's a more private expression of the moon, especially, or even if the moon sign is a more outward expressing moon sign. With that in the fourth house, it tends to be a more private and more guarded. They're not as openly vulnerable. They don't necessarily put that emotional experience or their emotions on the table as readily. And the connection to their family, their connection to their roots is really important to them, for better or for worse. The moon in the fifth house is a really creative energy. With the moon in the fifth house, this person needs a really solid creative expression, like regularly. They need to express creatively regularly in order to express their emotions. Those two things are kind of intertwined for the moon in the fifth house. They release their emotions through art, through dance, through whatever it is. It's a creative expression, and it kind of helps them process and release those emotions. It also can be tied with children. So if you have your moon in the fifth house, it could be that naturally you're like a natural born parent, whether you have kids or you work with kids. Those parenting tendencies come naturally to you. So moon in the sixth house is all about our routines. So the moon here needs to really feel rooted in their routines and structure. And it's important to them to be able to have those routines, have that structure in order to feel safe and secure in themselves. If that structure or routine gets messed up in any way, they probably feel out of sorts, and they're not going to be operating at their best. The moon in the seventh house is all about relationships. So having a solid foundation, having solid relationships that you can fall back on are really important to you. You may also find that you look for a partner that has your moon sign tendencies represented. So like say your moon and your seventh house are Capricorn. You may look for a partner that is really grounded and much more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not necessarily that they are detached from their emotions, but just that they feel safe to you, if that makes sense. They feel, I can't think of the word. I'm doing that all the time today. You feel secure with them. That's a good word. Capricorns are really secure. They're really like, they operate right here at a baseline. So you may look for those qualities in a partner, regardless of your moon sign. It doesn't have to just be Capricorn. That was the first thing that came to me. But you need those qualities represented in a partner to feel safe. The moon in the 8th house. The 8th house is all about inner transformation, and it also can be about your partner's money, and it can be about death and rebirth in a lot of ways. So this can be a really transformative moon sign. You really like to dig deep into the dark, deep depths of the world and your soul and who you are, your mind. It's a very explorative sign, but on a, not explorative in a tangible external sense. It's very explorative in terms of the non-tangible things in our life, whether that's spirituality, religion, anything occult-like, dark, deep depths of the psyche. The moon in the 9th house is more explorative on a external level. They're exploring and really need that. It's my cat. They really need that exploration in, that threw me off. They really need to explore the world and express themselves through exploring, if that makes sense. So with a 9th house moon, they might be, this is more long-term learning. We talked about the 3rd house is more short-term learning. This is more long-term learning. They are really diving deep into subjects like religion, spirituality, law, foreign culture. Like, it's a very, their interests are very vast, and they want to know a little, they want to know a lot about a little. They really want to dive deep into life's big questions, but from a more logical standpoint, if that makes sense. And they feel safe in doing that. So the moon in the 10th house is all about our passions and careers. And so in terms of work, or the work that you feel most passionate about, you really lead with your moon sign, especially if your moon is really close to your midheaven. That expression of the moon is very prevalent in the work that you do. And you are seen professionally as your moon almost. So if your moon is like a Cancer moon, you may find yourself working in a really empathetic field where you're providing like guidance and mothering and nurturing to like a patient or your client or something like that. So, quick sip. The moon in the 11th house really needs a solid foundation of friendships, of relationships, a solid connection to their community in order to feel safe. They need to feel rooted within their community, whether that's like a small community of friendships and family, or it's like the city that they live in. They also can be big advocates. So the 11th house is all about advocacy and advocating for minorities or groups that you feel are oppressed within the community. And they really need that in order to feel safe. They need that solid connection to their community. So last house, the moon in the 12th house is a very intuitive place to be. It is, the moon in the 12th house needs a lot of alone time to sift through their emotions. It's a more private expression of the moon. They're not like readily sharing their emotions, and they may not always be super available to them either. They really need to pull back in order to sift through, how am I feeling about this? What's coming up for me? It can also have a really deep connection to the spiritual. I can't. And have a spiritual nature to them. So they may find that their emotional expression is connected to like a religious or spiritual practice, something like meditating or prayer or something along those lines. But again, it's the need to pull back in order to like sift through emotions, sift through emotional experiences, and really figure out how they feel about something. Okay, those are all the signs. I mean, those are all the moons through the houses. And I think next, okay, I'll talk briefly about aspects and then we'll talk about moon phases. So aspects to the moon can be really important, just like with any planet. We've talked about the houses, we've talked about the signs, and you can understand your moon through those two things. But if you have a really tight aspect to the moon or multiple tight aspects to the moon, that will absolutely flavor your moon. And I don't know if you heard that. That was my stomach. It will absolutely flavor the moon and the way that your moon expresses itself. So say, for example, you have aspects to Saturn. Aspects to Saturn will restrict your emotional expression, and you may notice that it's a much more private expression, or even that like you are not always able to access your emotions and your emotional expression. Whereas like with Jupiter is something that expands. So it's going to expand your emotions. So it's going to expand your emotional expression, and it's going to expand what that moon is, like the sign that it's in and the house that it's in. It's expanding those things. Whereas if you have like moon Pluto aspects, those are really dark, deep, a very introspective moon wanting to really turn inward, ask themselves the hard-hitting questions, and dive deep into like their psyche and the way that the world works, dive into the darker parts of our world. Again, if you have like moon Uranus, that is you need a lot of freedom to express. Uranus is, the sign of rebellion. So you may find your emotional expression goes against the grain, or you may find that you're the one with like the radical opinions or beliefs about things. So those are a couple. I'm not going to dive into all of them, but take into consideration, is the aspect hard? Is it soft? How close is the aspect? I would say anything less than like 4 degrees is really significant. And take into consideration, of course, the planet. So the planet is going to absolutely dictate the nature of the aspect. So aspects to the sun in terms of the moon are what we consider a moon phase. So you may be familiar with the cycle of the moon that happens like right now. So like we have a full moon coming up in a couple of days. Well, whatever moon phase we are born in can also say a lot about ourselves, a lot about us, about who we are, our personalities, how we do things. So not only is, like I said, the house, the sign, the aspects really important, this moon phase can also give you a lot of really good information about who you are and why you do the things that you do. So to calculate your moon phase, you always start with the sun and calculate how far away the moon is from your sun. If you don't really want to deal with the math, totally understandable, you can just Google, and I might put in the description a link to a calculator. And I'll also probably put a link to like another article on the moon phases, because I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. Honestly, they probably need their own video. So I'm just going to be brief with their explanations. And I have them right in front of me so that I know I can be brief, because sometimes I just talk forever. But like I said, start with your sun. So like, for example, if your sun is at like 2 degrees Taurus and your moon is at 5 degrees Taurus, they would be 3 degrees apart. But hold on with me here. If your moon is at 2 degrees, no. If your sun is at 2 degrees Taurus, let's keep that. But your moon is at 1 degree Taurus, you have to start with the moon, go all the way around. So that would be like 359 degrees. Whereas the sun in Taurus at 2 degrees, the moon at 5 degrees is only 3 degrees. So keep that in mind. Again, if you don't want to deal with the math, feel free to use a calculator so you know that for sure you're going to get it correctly. But the degrees will be important. So find it one way or another. Okay, so if your moon is 0 to 44 degrees away from the sun, that is a new moon phase. So new moon people have lots of ideas, and they tend to be a little impulsive when it comes to them. It almost manifests as like similarly to ADHD. I don't want to say that that's what it is, but in order for you to kind of understand it, it can be like that. It's fast paced, it's lots of ideas and jumping around quickly. The waxing crescent is 45 degrees to 89 degrees away from the sun. You are really curious and have a youthfulness about you. And this can also kind of express as a little like naive sometimes, for better or for worse. If you are born under a first quarter moon, your moon would be 90 degrees to 134 degrees away from the sun. And this is representative in someone who has a lot of grit. They're really tenacious when it comes to fighting the challenges and hardships in their lifetime. If you were born under a waxing gibbous moon, your moon would be 135 to 179 degrees away from the sun. This is the phase right before the full moon. So we're thinking like, here's your sun. You're almost at 100 degrees away. You are playful and always redefining your craft. This energy is like humor is really important to this moon phase. They're, like I said, playful, have a lot of energy. Yeah. Okay. Full moon. Like I said, now we're at the full moon. We're at that opposing. That's 180 degrees to 224 degrees away from your sun. It's very adventurous. You see each day as a new adventure, and it's very experiential. You're learning through your experiences, through your adventures. The waning gibbous moon happens if you were born 225 degrees to 269 degrees away from the sun. You are wise, and it's really important with this phase. You're at the point where you have all of these, you've learned a lot. You have all this wisdom, and it's time for you to share it. It's time for you to teach it. The third quarter moon phase is 270 degrees to 214 degrees away from the sun. This is a really experiential energy. No, excuse me. I'm sorry. I was reading the wrong thing. I was like, that's not right. You experience internal pressures. There's a lot of internal pressure, and you will see a transformation over your lifetime. So a lot happens behind the scenes. A lot happens underneath the surface for you. Last moon phase. This is the waning crescent, also known as the balsamic. P.S. Some of these moon phases may have different names. So like I said, this is the waning crescent, but it can also be the balsamic. So just keep that in mind. I haven't done that. I haven't used all the names each time. So this is 315 degrees to 359. It's the last phase in the cycle before we get back to a new moon. So that would be like what I was talking about earlier. Here's your sun and your moon is over here. I don't know if my visuals are working, but they work in my head. Okay. This is, again, known as the balsamic phase. It is a slower moving energy. You tend to move a little slower than others. And this lifetime for you is about ending karmic or finishing karmic lessons. So you're finishing karmic relationships or lessons that you didn't finish in previous lifetimes. It's all about closing things up and learning lessons, getting to like an end almost in different areas of your life. So those are the moon phases. There are 8 moon phases. I might link an article with a bit more in depth, just because that was very brief, but I think it would take me another 40 minutes if we talked about the in-depth moon cycles or moon phases. So that's the moon in a very brief 40-minute video for you. And yes, I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the moon, please put them in the comments. And I love the moon. I think it's such an important part. I feel so validated by my moon. Yeah. And I think it's such an important part of who we are. So I hope that was really helpful. And I hope that you guys feel like you have a better understanding of your moon sign and how it impacts you. As always, I really appreciate any likes, comments, subscribes. sharing this with others. Any way that you can support this channel, I really appreciate it so much. You guys don't know. I don't just say that lightly. I really do appreciate your support. So thank you. And look forward to next week. I am not sure, because this is about understanding planets, so I'm not sure if I'll do the rising sign next. I think I'll just jump into Mercury, and maybe we'll do the rising sign when I'm done with this series. So catch me next week for understanding your Mercury sign. And like I said, let me know if you guys have any questions. Thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful week, and hope you have a beautiful full moon too. I'm going to do another video on the full moon and Saturn moving into Pisces probably, but that's coming up in a few days. So love you guys. Bye.